Hallo und willkommen zu einer neuen Folge des Tech- und Community-Podcasts. In der heutigen Folge ist Jeff Guillet zu Gast. Er ist MVP in den Kategorien M365 für die Technologiebereiche Microsoft 365 und Exchange. Man kann es kaum glauben. Er lebt und arbeitet in Kalifornien und daher switchen wir jetzt rüber zu Englisch. Hello Jeff, it's a pleasure having you. Please introduce yourself to our listeners.
Hi Thomas, thanks for having me. This is a good topic.
So, can you please introduce yourself to our listeners, mate?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Hi, I'm Jeff Guillet. I am a Microsoft MVP for the last 15 years and a Microsoft Certified Master. Thomas and I are one of the few, the handful on the planet that hold both MVP and MCM status. And I've been doing consulting. I have my own consulting company in California, but I do work with customers worldwide and primarily around the exchange and identity space.
Awesome. So, as you already mentioned, we have known each other for quite some time now, primarily because of Exchange.
Yes.
So, what were your thoughts when you read the Exchange Server Subscription Edition announcement a few weeks ago?
Well, I'm happy to see that they haven't changed their mind and there will be a future version of Exchange. We've seen through the course of our careers, public folders exist. Now they don't. Now they do again. Now they don't. So it can. Microsoft can change their mind at any time. Good to see that it is continuing on.
Yeah, so you already mentioned two of the major topics that I'm going to focus on later on. It was primarily the master topic and public folders. I'm glad you brought up that topic and it was not on mine. So, and it's just out of coincidence right now. So, your customers, in regards to the usage of Exchange, are they primarily on-prem, online only, or hybrid, or?
Pretty much a mix. I'd say most are in the cloud. I've got a few that are on-prem and intend to stay on-prem. Even with the addition of subscription edition, this affects all Microsoft customers who were ever hybrid, because if they have a hybrid management server, they're going to have to upgrade that to SE. There's, as you know, once hybrid, forever hybrid, pretty much, unless you can move all of your workloads to the cloud. File servers, application servers that authenticate on-prem, they're going to be have AD as their source of authority. And so for that, they need a hybrid server or hybrid management to occur on-prem. And for that, for that reason, they're going to have to continue the upgrade path. The majority of my customers are either in hybrid. I do a lot of hybrid work where I'm moving customers to the cloud, even from very old versions. So, it's all over the board though.
So in regard to hybrid, any of your customers using modern hybrid?
A few. Usually they've already got it configured when I'm engaged to do an upgrade. At that time, I'll usually flip them from modern to
classic.
Traditional. Because they just didn't know when they were doing it, the word modern. Nobody wants to be legacy. Everybody wants to be modern, right? Microsoft chooses these terms carefully and for a reason, right?
Really?
Yeah. There is an ulterior motive. And so it's important that, I want them in a supported place where it's really easy to understand and they work with it and they get it. So usually that's legacy.
Yeah, as you already mentioned, once you implemented hybrid, so starting with hybrid identity and then put on or switch on in addition Exchange hybrid, you're more or less trapped, as I mostly stated, and even less. Yeah, because last week in a meeting where a large global client, so from within the automotive industry, we discussed any solution approaches on how to move to creating cloud-only objects, even though the identity space is in hybrid, and
Right.
Exchange is still in full classic hybrid. And I mentioned, well, as soon as you start the hybrid journey, it's a journey forever, right?
Right.
And that was not very well received.
Right. Well, it's reality, and customers thought that a lot of customers very often when I get engaged with them, they're thinking, oh, they can get rid of their last Exchange server, and as long as they need internal relay, and they're going to need some fashion to
Mm-hmm.
do that. So why, if you need a relay anyway, nothing's going to do relay better than Exchange because of the
Right.
Exchange hybrid connectivity and the way that it sends and it trusts everything that comes from Exchange server. A third-party MTA is not going to provide that level
Mm.
of being able to send things. They might end up in the junk folder or get caught as spam or phishing. So by sending through Exchange, you resolve those problems. So it always comes back to a discussion of why you're trying to get rid of your last Exchange server. What's the purpose there, right? Is it
Right.
that I don't want to patch these things anymore? Well, if you don't patch anything, you're at risk. So it usually ends up being a discussion around that.
Yeah, right. The topic of the last Exchange server is something that that is coming on and on again for the last, well, forever.
Well, ever since I've been going to tech ed, I mean, when BPOS existed, it was a question of how do we get rid of our last Exchange server, and for the last 8 to 10 years, it's coming. We're
Yeah,
working on that,
yeah,
right? But
right.
we've seen a little bit of progress in that they were able to go serverless, but it still doesn't resolve the SMTP relay issue.
Yeah, actually, it doesn't. And even without breaking any kind of NDA, I think we can surely say that the Exchange developers and the Exchange group normally tends to say, well, we are ready for this, but it's this Active Directory and
Right.
Entra guys, yeah, who delay stuff.
Hmm.
I don't know if it's the truth, because
Yeah.
again, it's all starts with the with hybrid identities.
Oh yeah,
Anyway,
absolutely. Yes. Identity management is key.
mm. So taking on the topic that if using an Exchange server as a relay and having even Exchange server as the for the SMTP connectivity in a hybrid situation, because it's a prerequisite to have a direct Exchange to Exchange server communication, right, for the hybrid mail flow.
Or hybrid mail flow, yeah.
For hybrid. So, do any of your customers tend to implement some sort of a third-party SMTP thingy, so to speak, so a precise term, in between for security reasons, as example, or are you always successful in telling them, nah, it must be Exchange to Exchange?
Um, I I do have some users. So, for example, I was working with one organization and they were using a third party MTA. And they're saying that's okay. We don't use Exchange for communication anyway. We're going to continue using this third party MTA. And I said, well, and they were using it all through their hybrid migration. And I was like, well, that's not supported. It has to be Exchange to Exchange. You can kind of get it to work, but messages, from on-prem that are being relayed could end up in your junk folder or being blocked by quarantine or going into the anti-phishing. And they're like, oh, that's why it's happening. It's been happening through this 3-year migration. They didn't
Yeah,
realize that's what it was. And they've been pulling their hair out trying to get it to work and doing all these workarounds and whitelisting and stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, that's the reason why. If you went with an Exchange MTA, we set that up and then everything worked. It's just
yeah,
perfect. And then they saw the value of that. And I'm like, okay, you're using this third party MTA that's running on,
Yeah.
it's running SendMail.
Oh.
Who's
Oh,
updating
nice.
that, right?
Yeah. Right.
What security flaws are being addressed there? And they're like, well, it's great. We never have to patch it. Well, you're vulnerable,
Wait.
right? You're vulnerable.
So
So yeah,
it's
uh,
so Setmate was a patchless product, right?
exactly.
Hmm.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we ended up actually backing it all out, not getting rid of
Mm.
SendMail, and we went with an internal
Mm.
exchange server for Relay as
Oh,
part of that
nice.
project, and solved a lot of problems, made everything, life is good.
Mm. Yeah.
So,
Right. Especially the secure hybrid mail flow between on-premises Exchange orgs and Exchange Online is, at least it's my feeling when talking with customers, is that this is some of the unknown mysteries because there's something in use called domain validation,
uh-huh,
right?
right.
Between the two,
Yes.
and that the TLS certificates play an essential part in
Yes.
having this communication properly secured and not making accessible to to external parties.
Correct. Yeah. Certificate management is a lot of what I work on during this process. They're wondering whether or not they can get rid of those certificates, and there are ways. Microsoft has actually improved the hybrid mail flow to allow different types of connectivity that are using self-signed certs, for example, or using wildcard certs. The the one issue is that if you ever run the hybrid configuration wizard, it's going to blow away whatever custom configuration you have and potentially upset your mail flow. So you need to know what you're doing
Yeah,
ahead of time. And once you run the HCW, then you go back and reconfigure what you need to configure.
yeah. So a personal question: do you like the new HCW with the granular
Absolutely.
option? Okay.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Having the ability to run with certain options, the HCW, with just updating the certificate and the SAN connectors without having to change the rest of the configuration, because there are some, uh, well, it's quite common for customers who have completed their migration to remove HTTPS traffic coming inbound to the Exchange server. So
Yeah.
the HCW, the traditional, the old HCW would fail because it would try to do a health check. Can I ping the server? And it can't. All I want to do is update the certificate. So now I don't need that inbound HTTPS traffic. I don't need to open it or deal with an error in the HCW. I can just say I'm updating the certificate and the send connectors, and we're good to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Right.
real nice.
So let's get back for a few things regarding to the subscription edition
Yes.
topic. So because I think, so my personal feeling is that it the roadmap announcement more or less just opens the space for additional questions where we do not
Mm-hmm.
have any answers yet.
Right.
Um, because there was no strict announcement what to expect from the subscription edition. So it's just more like, okay, I can take a look at the SharePoint server subscription edition, how it's handled there, like licensing and such. So
Licensing. You're the black art of licensing. Okay.
yeah, some kind of a Pandora's box, right?
Right.
But there's a lot of assumptions flowing around, how is this going to happen, because nobody really took a look at how it's handled with the
Right.
already available subscription edition for SharePoint Server, even though
Right.
they are now for a second time named that other product. um, so, do you already get such questions from your customers?
There's a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt around licensing for SE. Um, the expectation that most customers have is that the licensing model will follow the same as what we're using for Exchange Online. in that you're paying month to month for a subscription, for a license. If you fail to pay your bill, you will no longer have service. It's a true service. That's the expectation that a lot of customers have. And that is not the case with the SE products. They are they are originally licensed through volume license subscription or subscription licenses using your enterprise agreement. Um, there is no validity checking in Exchange Server SE like there is in Microsoft. In Microsoft, if you don't have a license, you don't have a mailbox. You are not legally allowed to run the software, but there is no validation checks.
Yeah, right. So it's either enterprise agreement or software assurance.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
And I think there's something that wasn't that. I think
so there's licenses plus software assurance, and or there are cloud subscription licenses, which are sometimes called user subscription licenses or USLs. And depending on the SKU that you purchase in the cloud, like E3 or E5, that gives you the right to run SE in the cloud. So for a lot of big customers, they may already be running Teams, for example. They have a subscription with a tenant with Microsoft. They already have some licenses assigned. And if they purchase, for example, an E3 license, Microsoft 365 E3 license, that gives them the user subscription license to run SE on-prem. So they would be able to run all the other workloads in the cloud, but still have their mail on-prem using subscription edition and their license for it. And then E3 and E5 also include the server license. So you don't even need to buy subscription edition server license. You have your user CALs or user licenses, and you have the server license with an E3.
Yeah, right. And I think it's worth mentioning that if you run a management-only server, so that the HCW can license that server as a coexistence server as long as you do have the appropriate cloud license available. Because the interesting part is that it's not included in all of the license schemes available. Right, so in this smaller business, let's say Business Basic, for example, does not contain such license, so it must be at least a standard. But nevertheless, it's pretty interesting that we received, let's say, it's pretty hot from the press, so to speak, because there was in our internal DL some information sent around today, which is not NDA. And it's explicitly stated to can be shared freely. So because Exchange Server SE will not require internet connectivity, so no license check. And
that's important for a lot of customers. Their Exchange servers don't touch the internet, and so they want to. There's some fear that if my Exchange server can't reach the internet, that it can't be licensed, but that's not true. Just like always, the license validity check is in the code of the software.
Right. So it's just a logical license check of the key itself. So it will not perform a product activation or any kind of online license validation. It just depending on the license key you enter, it just determines if it's a standard enterprise or hybrid, aka coexistence. Period. Yes. And if it's a product keyless server, it's just automatically a 180-day trial. Period.
Correct. Just like it always has been. Yes.
Yeah, and again, this is more or less in this as clearly stated as of today, and not NDA. Period.
Right. Correct.
So that is nice that we have some. Yeah, it's a clear information on that now. Otherwise, it wasn't.
Yes.
Lingering in the twilight zone of licensing ideas.
That's right. Yeah, it is a dark art, and
it's a dark.
A lot of people. There's a lot of confusion around it. So, an example of something that comes up quite often is that the free hybrid license that comes with Exchange Hybrid when you're configuring it through the HCW is only valid as long as you have no user mailboxes on the hybrid configure management editor. So if you have some old legacy mailboxes that you haven't gotten rid of and they're sitting on there, then you're legally not entitled to the HCW free license. So you should either remove those, export them to a PST, or move them to the cloud as shared mailboxes.
Or you are in trouble, as soon as the license check team knocks on your door.
Yeah.
Right. But let's talk about the other dark art. So do you still, or do your customers still use public folders or even email-enabled public folders?
Yeah, actually, I'm not like Tony Redman, who calls public folders the cockroaches of the IT world. I have quite a few customers that rely on public folders, and they have their appropriate use case in a lot of environments.
Agreed.
And as a matter of fact, I am working with an energy company right now doing public folder migration from 2016 to 2019 that is has its problems that we're trying to work through, but they run their business on public folders. So we are, it's not like they can give them up or change to using SharePoint or some other purpose. It's not as easy as that because their business runs off of them and the automation that is they've invested in public folders. So they're not common, but the ones who have them use them and they need them. So I'm glad there's still support for them.
So, but it tends that, let's say, messaging people who clearly have an understanding on how public folders work, and especially depending on their heritage, are getting less and less. So there are just a fewer and fewer people, knowing about how this public folder thingy stuff works.
How about you? Do you have customers using public folders?
Yes. Short answer, yes.
Yeah.
So we were able to, so even in a larger environment where we had legacy public folders larger than 1 terabyte, and we were able to cut this down by half for migration from legacy to modern. And then, other projects took over, and the roughly 500 GB thingy already grew again to 750 GBs. And now with moving to the cloud, the overall strategy is public folders will not be migrated to Exchange Online. So there is now more pressure on this to get rid of the public folders. And the first step is getting rid of mail-enabled public folders, which is a pain in the thingy, It's period.
But I'm happy to see Microsoft investing. They pretty much got to their end state now. I don't know that they're going to make much more improvements, but a lot of the earlier limits on number of folders, size of folders have been eliminated.
But normally I tend to say, hey, public folders in Exchange Online are really good because these are self-managed for the public folder mailboxes compared to on-premises, right?
Right.
So
the one thing I'm disappointed on in public folders is the lack of access through OWA for customers who are using there, and to a much smaller extent through the Outlook mobile app. But it's more of an OWA issue that I come across. That's unfortunate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like the OWA team never was told that public folders are really going to stick around, so they haven't done any investments there.
Yeah, and one of my favorites is still the fact that I do have a public folder mailbox having a 50 GB limit and having a public folder hierarchy with unlimited quota on the folders, right?
Yeah,
that's a clever thing to do.
Yeah, right.
So let's switch over to the shortly to a certification topic. So Microsoft terminated the Exchange-related MS-203 on December 31st of 2023, which, well, let me ask you first, is it wise that there's no certification available for learning messaging-related topics?
No.
Okay, short answer.
Yeah. I used to help write exams for Exchange Server. And this is not just my background talking, it's just the world in reality still uses Exchange on-prem. And for Microsoft Learning to pretend we live in a world where only Exchange Online is the only messaging platform, they don't even consider hybrid. These are the things that companies need their employees to know. And so the value of the certifications where they live in a world where Exchange on-prem and hybrid do not exist is not reality.
It's an
And
illusion.
so I don't follow the value of having that certification.
Yeah.
Anymore.
Right.
So
yeah, I totally agree, because I even if I think that Exchange Online Protection and this Defender stack, which sits in front of the, let's say,
right.
your Exchange Online mailbox, is changing and evolving each and every week, right?
Mm-hmm.
Say you need to have some knowledge, and what are the implications if Microsoft changes such and such behavior on your SMTP connection stack, right?
Yeah. You need to have a much more well-rounded outside of Microsoft view of networking and SMTP protocols and TLS and all the things that you don't just hit a button. Where do I go to click this and turn it on? You need to understand what the implications are and how it works.
Yeah, totally agree. I normally tend to say, that we still rely on a protocol which, sources back from the 80s of the last century, right?
Exactly.
It's quite old. So, as you mentioned, so we are among the few people, with a certified master certification. Do you think that such a certification is missing nowadays, in your opinion?
I do. I absolutely feel there's a value for it. It was difficult for Microsoft to monetize it and make it a program that made sense from a money standpoint to Microsoft. It costs a lot of money to run a program like that and train people. And it's very expensive from, as you know, from a participant in the program.
I know.
3 solid weeks of 24-hour a day drinking from the fire hose exchange. You're not billing. You don't have time to call your wife. It is 100% exchange for 21 days. And then the exams that go along with it is just, it's a monumental amount of work to go through that. Best time of my life. I really, really enjoyed doing it. It was life-changing.
Yeah.
However, it doesn't make sense from a money standpoint to get for Microsoft, so they ditched it for that reason. I still think there is definitely a need. I mean, obviously, we're still employed. We're still working, a lot of jobs, and I'm busier than I ever have been. I'm running into more of situations where customers have neglected their IT infrastructure, and there are a lot more customers who used to run IT properly, but they've lost staff, or they've not invested in them, and for those reasons, those customers are really good cloud customers. They don't have the infrastructure and the talent on staff to run their own IT. And so they make a very good customer for the cloud, especially those that are running old versions of Exchange that are deemed as persistently vulnerable, like Exchange 2010 and 2013.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I still have customers who are running 2013, few that are even running 2010, that are now getting affected by the persistent throttling. Have you had any customers with that?
Not yet.
So Microsoft is taking the stance of Exchange products like Exchange 2010, 2013, and now 2016 that are no longer being updated are considered persistently vulnerable. There are security problems out there that are not going to be patched by Microsoft because these products are out of mainstream support. They're end of life. So they're not going to keep supplying security patches for them indefinitely. And for that reason, Exchange Online is, when a connection comes in that is coming from an Exchange 2010 server or 2013, for example, it will start throttling those connections. Now, Microsoft's the only vendor that's doing this right now, but it's feasible that other vendors might do this as well. And they're doing what they can to protect their infrastructure.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think we should mention that this is primarily at this point in time focusing on the hybrid SMTP connectivity,
Correct.
right? So
Yeah.
just because the secure connection between on-premises Exchange organization and Exchange Online, due to its security preface, is such a vulnerable and such a potential threat even to the overall platform. That's the reason
You're
for
right.
the throttling, right?
You're right, Thomas, because
So-
the hybrid connection bypasses a lot of the security.
All right. So
by having insecure servers going over a secure connection and being treated as secure is a threat. If your server running an old server version gets a vulnerability that lets them take over and send as many emails as possible, you don't want that vulnerable server sending all these emails into the service. So for that reason, they're throttling and eventually blocking. So
yeah, right. So because there's a threat to the overall service itself, and therefore for all the other tenants within the service.
exactly. So you want to keep your servers up to date, latest versions, latest CUs. Otherwise, they're considered vulnerable and subject to throttling.
Right. So are you
Especially your hybrid.
still? Yeah, absolutely. Especially the hybrid thing. So are you still active as a speaker at tech events?
Not so much. Last event that I did was the Tech, the Experts Conference in, Atlanta, I think it was 2 years ago. The events, when Microsoft kind of moved over toward non-in-person events and focusing on virtual events, the joy kind of went out for me because it's meeting people like you and all my colleagues and talking to customers face to face in those water cooler talks around a whiteboard. Those are why I go to those events. I don't go to them necessarily to speak or to see talks about for different things. I understand you went to Scotland, or you're going to Scotland.
For the Scottish Summit this year? Yeah, absolutely, because it's such an awesome community event. And I really like the fact that the Scottish Summit not only focuses on tech topics, but even on inclusion topics, for example.
That's great.
Right. So, and mental health topics. So this is more than just a tech conference.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, you really have to do that in person. That's not a virtual event. So
no. Right.
Yeah. And that's where the true value comes. So I'm also getting to a point where I'm winding down a little bit. I'm not retired yet, but close. And so I'm really only do the things that bring me joy. those types of projects. And, virtual events do not bring me joy. So I don't invest in those.
Yeah. Okay. No further words on virtual events.
Right.
So that brings me more or less to my final question, because how did you find your way into the IT industry?
Oof. Wow. I started off as a programmer. I was coding. I think that helped a lot because I learned how to troubleshoot my own code and others. Uh, I always loved computers, so I got into them. And when my brother is a year and a half younger than me, and it seemed like every year I was in school, computers came the year after. My brother got to use the computers, but to me, they were just amazing machines and I wanted to use them. And so I got into programming a little bit for my first probably 8 years of my career as coding and programming. And then I got into networking, originally in Novell, and then moved to Microsoft uh, on accident and
Ah.
took off from there. And it was great. I just really enjoyed working with Microsoft products. I think they've got it's not a religion to me, but I like their products. I like the way that they manage their products and how they support them. So,
Interesting. So that you mentioned Novell, because Novell was mentioned by Niklas Blank in the
yeah,
previous podcast. So I thought, yeah,
yeah,
okay,
we're in the
just
three.
by just by throwing in such company names, you always say, oh, we're talking that age,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
So yeah, Nicholas and Brian Reed. I think we're the four remaining MCM MVPs. So the yeah, when I started to get into Microsoft, and I really liked just general networking, and then it was kind of like I could see there were three career paths to take. One was Exchange, the other was SharePoint, and the other was SQL. I'm glad I took Exchange. At that time, this was back in NT4 days,
Oh
and
yeah,
uh, SharePoint did a really good job of marketing because customers would say, "I don't know what the problem is, but the answer is SharePoint." I never, and that's now what we're seeing. That's happened so many times in my career. Right now, that's AI. I don't know what the problem is, but the answer is AI.
yeah. This
Copilot,
yeah,
right?
the C word, right?
Yeah, right, right. So yeah, like
Awesome.
those were the big buckets where you could take a
Mm,
career and just spend your career working on that. And I'm
yeah,
glad I went the exchange route. I like the
yeah,
collaboration and the identity portion and Active Directory and all that good stuff. That it just
yes,
gets me going. That's my
yeah.
bread and butter. I love it.
Yeah, same for me. Back in the day when I had to make a decision regarding okay, which kind of technology I do want to take the master's course for, I had to take either the blue one or the red one, right?
Right.
SharePoint or
Yeah.
Exchange.
Right.
So Exchange it was.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Jeff, thank you for your time.
Thank you. It's been great talking to you, Thomas.
Ja, das war's ja schon wieder. Die Links zu Jeffs Social Media Profilen, seinem Blog und zur EXPTA Consulting findet ihr wie immer im Blogartikel zu dieser Episode. Den Link zum Artikel findet ihr in der Episodenbeschreibung und über podcast.radikos.eu. Bis zum nächsten Mal.